Alright, hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. We've had an abundance of clear skies here in Cyprus over the last few weeks since I've been home, and I've been taking this opportunity just to continue to tweak and play and try different things with the telescopes. And this latest video is all about my first attempt at doing a two-panel mosaic of the Solar Nebula, and a couple of processing things I followed through with that. So first up, here we are in Nina, which is my imaging capture software of choice now, and pulling up the target. The Solar Nebula is IC1848, and found it in the Sky Atlas, and then we sent it across to the framing assistant. And with the framing assistant, after doing a slew and center on the target, I can then use the panel counts on the middle left here to set the number of panels that I want in the mosaic, and then I can just reposition exactly how I want to frame the target after having first determined the rotation from camera. By clicking that, it calculates the orientation of your camera, and then you can get your correct positioning for your panels. So after doing that and setting up the panels, so I've got two horizontal panels side by side, I can add the target to the sequence, and that then transfers the two panel coordinates across to the sequencer. So if we have a quick look in the sequencer, here's the two panels, Solar Nebula panel 1 and panel 2, and then I simply set them up how I wanted to run each of the panels. So I've got the usual things: center after drift, restore guiding, meridian flip, etc. And then I've also got the autofocus after an HFR increase, so it's constantly monitoring for the focus condition. For this particular capture, I dithered every 2 exposures, and then I simply took 24 images of 5 minutes using a gain of 125, and there was a 0 offset. And then exactly the same for the second panel, and of course the other important step that's been added into the instructions is slew and center, so that each of the panels, the scope can go to the correct position. So I've got no automatic rotator, so everything is fixed on the rotation axis. And then finally, at the end of the sequence, once it had completed both the panels, I simply stopped the guiding and closed up the scope, closed up the observatory, and set the telescope back to the home position and stopped it, and that brought the imaging session to an end. So for the guiding, we just use PhD as normal, and I'm doing a few tweaks here and there with that. And for this session, this evening, here's the log viewer for PhD2. Log sections 1 through 5 were simply me messing around at the start of the night, just trying different things and looking at a few different targets and things. But sections 6 and 7 relate to the two panels from the imaging session, and we can see at the bottom of the screen the panel number 1, we had a total RMS error of 0.67 arc seconds, and for panel number 2 it's slightly improved, 0.62 arc seconds. And we can see at the top 2 lines, which is the star mass and the signal to noise ratio, they were improving throughout the night, obviously, as conditions were changing in the sky. So that's the PhD. So after grabbing the data, opened them up in the FITS viewer as usual, and here we can see here's panel 1 just loading, so everything looked not too bad there. And then panel 2 was the second set of 24 images, and we can see they've again come up not too bad. Now I didn't bother filtering any of the data out. There was a couple that had star trails in them and things like that, a couple of satellite trails, but I just left them, and let's see what the software did with them. So as I say, I didn't filter anything out, I just took all the frames, and on this occasion I also took bias frames, dark frames, and your standard flat frames. I wasn't happy with the flat frames, so I went back this morning and took a new set of flat frames, a slightly different setup, and they came out a little bit better, so I used them in the mix. So for stacking this target, I used Astro Pixel Processor. So I loaded everything into all the frames into Astro Pixel Processor. So we had 48 lights in total, 30 flat frames, 10 dark frames and 30 bias frames. And in the registration, I set the registration mode to Mosaic, and then I just proceeded as normal with the integration. And it did give me a couple of prompts for changing multi-band blending, and also one of the stop settings, it recommended making a change there, which I did. So I then left Astro Pixel Processor to run, and it came up with this image here, as we can see on the screen. And then I also used one of the tools, whatever it was called again, remove light pollution, just to see what difference that would make to it. And it did have a change, although I don't have that image loaded. So after Astro Pixel Processor had finished, it was time to start processing the image in PixInsight. Now, to do that, I did a combination of some of my usual things, but I also used some ideas out of Celestial Photography's Rosette Nebula video, and I just pulled out a couple of things there to try on the processing. So if we head across to PixInsight now, use PixInsight for doing all the processing, and here is the image as it came out of Astro Pixel Processor. So we can see the difference across the center where the two panels have been overlapped. So for the settings I used in Nina, I had a 20% overlap on the panels. And then it was simply a case of going through and carrying out the processing. So this image on the screen is the stretched image out of Astro Pixel Processor. I then extracted the channels and used the linear fit just to clean up some of the data as per the Celestial Photography's video, and just to see how that would come out after first doing a statistics check and finding the best low median value, and then recombined the images back into one RBG image, which we can see on the screen here. So yeah, there's still a lot of cleanup still to do. We've still got a lot of the gradients around the edges, etc. But it's starting to look like something is coming through quite cleanly. So I then went to try both DBE, so dynamic background extraction, and automatic background extraction, and these are the results from those two sets of data. I think I elected in the end to choose dynamic background extraction just because there was less gradients across the images. It was a more clean, flat field, with the exception of the band in the middle where the overlap of the frames have been merged together. So then I took the dynamic background extraction, and as per the Rosette Nebula video from Celestial Photography, I carried out another linear fit on the data, and having also then proceeded to create a range mask and a luminance mask from that, and then reapplied that in through the histogram transformation. And at this point I also used noise exterminator just to try and clean up the background of the image. So this is where we got to at this stage. I then proceeded to split the image using StarNet 2, and on the left of the image there you can see the starless, and the one next to it is obviously the stars. And I played around with the curves and the histograms just to try and pull out some of the detail in the images. And to do that I applied different combinations at different points of the range masks you can see on the right hand side of the image. I then recombined both the starless and the stars at various points while I was doing the curves and the histograms, just to see how the different variants came along as I was making adjustments following recombination of the starless and the stars. So here we can see the three combined views at the various stages. And after I was satisfied with what I'd come up with, which was the recombined version 3 on the right hand side, I then took that across onto another workspace and continued to tweak around with the curves and the histograms, and then also applied the dark structure enhance script, which is part of PixInsight. And at this stage I was pretty pleased how things were coming out. We were starting to get some of the blues coming out of the cores, but the only area that I wasn't really too great about was this top left shoulder of the nebula. It is very rich in the reds, and I didn't want to start trying to filter that out further because I knew I would end up destroying the image. So I've just left it as it is for the time being, and I can always go back and revisit the data at some point. So after taking the image, so this obviously is two panels joined together with a 20% overlap. It's quite a large image, 7,000 pixels by 5,800 pixels almost. So I took it into the third workspace and I did a rotation on it, and then resampled and cropped down to a standard 4K resolution for exporting to PNG data. So that was my first venture into a Mosaic, and I'm pretty pleased with how it's come out. Yes, there is obviously still work to be done in the processing, but I think things are coming along slow and steady as we continue to try different techniques and get more and more familiar with various tools within PixInsight. And switching to Astro Pixel Processor, I've seen a big difference there as well compared to DSS. And I've also tried stacking, not necessarily this particular data set, but some other tests I've been doing over the last week or so in both PixInsight, DSS and Astro Pixel Processor, just to see the variation in the three of them. And Astro Pixel Processor is coming out probably the best of the bunch at the moment for the time taken to process. And PixInsight, yeah, it takes an extremely long time to run these things. So when I'm just wanting to do testing and trial and error and different things, I don't want to wait 8-10 hours for an image to be integrated. So I'm happy using Astro Pixel Processor for the time being. So there we have it, IC1848, the Sol Nebula, 2 panels using a one-shot color camera, and the IDAS NBZ UHS dual narrowband filter. So on that note, I will leave you with the final image, and thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and of course please, any feedback, comments, questions, do feel free to drop them down, and I wish you clear skies, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching.